have you been, my blue-eyed son? And where have you been, my darling young one? Stumbled on the side of 12 misty mountains. I've walked and I've crawled on 6 crooked highways. I've stepped in the middle of 7 sad forests. I've been out in front of a dozen dead oceans. Been 10,000 miles in the mouth of a graveyard. And it's hard, oh it's hard, and it's hard, and it's hard. But a hard rain's gonna fall. Well, a hard rain's gonna fall.
Lord and lady look on with understanding eyes, while 3 impatient little boys with trembling hearts split and tear their sparkling Christmas wrappings, with never once a care or thought for those who gave so kind, receptive thoughts existing in their mind. It's quickly over, all the openings done. A river of noisy, laughing fun flows gaily through its costly, toyful banks. Yet not one word is said of thanks. And in a lonely room not so far away sat another little boy awakened to the festive day. In the center of a dirt-stained bed he sat and bowed his grubby head, staring at his single gift, well worn and second-hand. Then his little heart forlorn burst, and his sleepy eyes were filled with tears of unbelieving joy, the first in many years. He ran up to his sleeping mother then and hung about her weary neck, and the tiny chamber rung with sobbing words he meant so true. Oh, Mummy, Mummy, thank you, thank you, thank you. His mother looked down on her weeping child, and she stroked his little curly head and weakly smiled. She watched him staring at the single toy wide-eyed. Then she too broke down and cried. Later he left the house to find his lordship's boys, to look and wonder at their splendid toys. And as he ran, he clutched his only gift, so small, tightly in his hand that it shouldn't slip or fall. And this poor boy was happier than the richest of them all. The seeping sands sift slowly as time itself marks the tortured way of ages. When are not grim recordings of crime, treachery, and of wretched strife seen on history's bleeding pages? When will there be lived a life of total peace by men? Before then, I die. Therefore, why should I be troubled? For all life forever will range through eternal evil. Hence I bear its burdens quietly. Can I change what the fates willed in time's sand? Let then my silent musing not despair of evil, but see better things in man.
Dear Sue, I believe in sincerity. I find that poetry's a way out, like a safety valve on spinning emotions. Emotions that cannot always find immediate release in the form of another person. When you write, you create this other person within yourself, and you're able to release these bottled feelings to yourself. It is something like cutting your own veins and watching your own blood flow. And when enough of it has passed out of you, you seal yourself up again. I don't know what you think of all this, but that is how I feel when I write.
A single salt droplet leaves its forehead spring and trickles shining down the ramparts of a work-weary face, channeling down the black-beaten lines of centuries of limb labor to drop coagulant in the dust. Hoarse breath limps light through parched rifts in sun-baked lips, eyes squinting through the tremor of summer heat on the low-lying land. Head down again, tendons taut, tightening, tired muscles back bunching, bulging, leaning burdened beasts, not straining, and the plow breaks through the sterile land. And at the edge of the field, a starving womb vomits up a stillborn child, and shriveled milkless breasts bear their ragged nipples to the sun. Bitter eyes meet through their searching tears, and the plow breaks through the sterile land.
And there on the hill, in the high house on the hill, affected mirth rings brittle down on empty ears. Idle tongues lip their lazy lies, disbelieving heads smile and nod, knowing. Strange metallic music echoes, straining for smooth stockinged feet and fat sweaty feet to reason out the rigid rhythms. Diamond fingers curve dainty round cool crystal, ever bending to slake up saturated mouths. Contented grunts and noises filter round the feast as heavy glutton stomachs move watering in, move impatiently in, to swallow and gape and gorge and swallow up completely the wonderful waste set before them. There's a party on the hill, and the people there are happy, are content with themselves on the hill.
And in the field, hungry, bitter eyes meet through their unheard tears, and the calloused plow breaks through the sterile land.
It is enough. All is well among us. All is well with the human race. Let us give thanks. Let us give thanks to nothing, for all is well.
Oh, hold me, gentle mother. Let me lie in your lap, cry in your lap. For on the hill they dance drinking, secure in false knowledge of right, safe in the fat of their money and might. In the fields, they lie hugging their shrunken stomachs and moaning at night. For somewhere it is written that the rich inherit the treasures of old, while the meek must content with mere earth. Oh, weep with me, bleed with me, gentle mother, till oblivion inherit us all.
And it came to pass that upon that day the people of the town seized the man and took him to the hill called the place of the skull, that lies on the east of the town where a hole had been struck. There to the hill they took him and laid his back on a slab of wood and slammed nails of iron through the bones of his hands and feet, and shouted and sang and screamed in their throats and their eyes to the time of the iron driven down. And he lay there among them in silence, with tears in his eyes and a song in his heart. They hoisted him up and planted the cross in the heart of the hill, and it shook with the shock, and the blood of the man ran in red rivers onto the ground. And he hung there among them in silence, with the sadness of tears in his eyes and a song of praise in his heart. And the people fell on cursing the man, where he hung by the holes in his hands. They danced and laughed and spat on the man, where he hung by his iron hands. And the man looked out upon them and blessed them in his eyes, and forgave them in silence in the rhythmic depths of his heart. Then, from the farthest corners of his soul, there rose a dreadful animal cry that shook the very dust on their feet. It rose from his throat, and it echoed and rose and echoed again down the green-gray vaults of the valley into the haze of the lands beyond. And then he was dead. And the people were sudden silent, and stroked their chins and dug their toes into the ground in fear, and would not look into one another's eyes. Then slowly they went their ways and returned to their crowded homes in the town, and the hill they called Skull was left silent and bare, but for the cross and the bleeding bones of the one they had murdered there. And behold, night kept quietly in on the hill called Skull, and dwelt in silence on the troubled town. And on the following day, the sun rose from the east at dawn, and returned to her seat in the west at dusk. Dear Sue, I'm not doing English and history any longer, but I'm trying to prepare myself for the philosophy I intend to do at the university. How I love that subject. I don't know what I'm searching for, but it's something along the lines of removing religion from the face of this earth. So much can be accomplished if man could only get away from it and really be man, the material and only man.
I took one look at life and covered my eyes and closed my ears and drew back my face. But life came after me, groping with warm fingers, feeling for me. And I fled and threw myself down from its ugly lips, tumbling down through soundless depths to oblivion. And at the bottom I looked up and still could hear the human cries split the night so far above. And still I ran and scrambled through my gaping jaws on bleeding knees to the coral cavern of my skull, and huddled there in the cooling breath of darkness there, cringing, and life was no more. Only the thin silence and stillness of time within my bony walls. I sit in this dark and cool and still. I sit crouching in the dimness of this covering solitude, peering out through black and sightless holes.
Oh, what did you see, my blue-eyed son? And what did you see, my darling young one? Saw a newborn babe, wild wolves all around it. Saw highway diamonds with nobody on it. Saw a black branch with blood that kept dripping. I saw a room full of men with their hammers bleeding. I saw a white ladder all covered with water. I saw 10,000 talkers whose tongues were all broken. Saw guns and sharp swords in the hands of young children. And it's hard, oh it's hard, and it's hard.
Dear Sue, I've come to a conclusion. I think that there must be a time in my life when I must go away, seclude myself from the rest of humanity as much as is possible for an indefinite number of years. I've felt this thing in me for quite a long time, but I was a little afraid of it. Not anymore. I now consider it as a thing I must do. The Dharmas and so on of India do this, and they attain a certain quality of serenity that surpasses anything else of its kind on earth. It's not so much this quality that I want, but I want to find the cause of it. It's like a cleaning of the soul or mind, and I think that it is only when a man is completely cut away from the trivialities of everyday life that he can sit and take his time and meditate over the more important things, the things that need thought and consideration. First, it would be best to define what is meant by the word soul. To me, this means spirit, mind, personality, and all those other qualities that go to make a person a unique person. Call it his I. Religion claims that this I or soul in man is something separate from the body, hence the theory of life after death and all that. But the soul of a man is not independent of his body, but rather is subordinate to and dependent on his material self. Does it not follow that with the death of the material self upon which the spiritual self is directly dependent, that the spiritual self ceases to exist also? It seems so to me. I want to find out the truth about everything, Sue, because I'm not satisfied now, and I don't think I will be until I do find the truth. You already know how much I believe in man as a whole and as an end in himself. Anyway, this belief, aided by my studying of Zen, has opened my eyes to a whole new concept of the world and of man himself. It is a thing of beautiful truth, so simple, so silent and calm that to put words upon it is to chain its wild freedom. Please understand that I cannot explain. It is something greater than the little boxes of words. I'm getting deeply involved in the problems of moral freedom, whether men really make free choices or not. I've come to the conclusion that they can't. Everything we do or decide is caused and compelled by our heredity and environment.
A man stricken with years of worry and grief tugged my sleeve by the wayside and whispered to me.
Speak to me, friend of love.
And I answered him, saying, a single drop of rain has fallen on the thirsty mustard tree. And he loosed my sleeve and stared with wonder and said aloud to me,
Tell me then of pain.
And I answered him, saying, a woman weeps for her newborn child. The eyes of the tiger in spring are wild. And he pulled his hair and stamped his foot and cried impatiently,
What then of life itself?
And I answered him, saying, the vulture waits for carrion things, for the vulture feeds on carrion things. And he tore his flesh and rolled his eyes and shrieked in wrath at me.
Tell me then, what of death?
And I answered the man, saying, the living taste of vultures' wings, and the living are of vultures' wings. And the man fell down in a frothing fit and rose again and hissed at me.
Tell me, what kind of man art thou?
And I answered the man, saying, why then ask you what I am? For I am the stone of the earth, and the moss under the stone. I am the sea of the ocean, and the clay beneath the sea. I am indeed all the earth itself, and I am the tree of the earth, and the wind that shakes the roots of the tree under the sun. For truly, I am nothing, all of me And truly, I am all. And you, my friend, and I are one. And the man stood in a new silence and continued on his way, and his bearing bore no longer the marks of grief and pain.
Dear Sue, how Western man has tangled himself in his logic and rationality. He has created his own problems through these mediums and now finds these inadequate for solving them. Ironic, inevitable. For the truth of reality is beyond all logic or reason. It is a stillness, a silence that is beyond words of reason. Until man acknowledges this silence and shuts his own logical and rational mouthings, how can he help but be confused? Truth is an experience, not an idea or thought. Lately I've been writing, just little thoughts and things that come to me spontaneously. Not really poems, just things, unrelated things, but little truths. I give you what I've done so far. Here are some things.
No man is innocent, you say? By whose standards, my friend? By what standard? Surely you mean simply that men are up and alive. If the living lost their ears, planets could collide silently, for then there would be no one there to listen. In a dismal section deep down in the headless monster called the big city, scrambling down dank walls, always the grim irony of fire escapes.
Those are things. The second one repeats itself over and over in my mind.
If the living lost their ears, planets could collide silently, for then there would be no one there to listen.
I hope to receive more of these. I like them. I've also written another poem. It came with a glow of goodness that I haven't felt for a long time. I don't know what caused it, and I haven't dared to try and analyze myself for a cause. It's far better that way. I don't know of what time I'm speaking in the poem, and so little does it matter. Time, like words, is a means, not an end in reality. It is of no consequence. Here. And in that year, the body of Walter Michael II passed through the ragged mountain of collected pain and off the face of this coveting earth, out into the plain of eternal night. And the wind of his spirit whistled across the ancient scars of his tongue and touched infinity with a white hand, thus. I've given it a name, though it doesn't want one. I call it thus, merely to mark it off from the poems that follow it, etc. in my book. Thus also has no meaning.
And what did you hear, my blue-eyed son? And what did you hear, my darling young one? With the sound of thunder, it roared out a warning. But the roar of a wave that could drown the whole world. Heard one person stall, I heard many people laughing. Heard the sound of a poet who died in the gutter. Heard the sound of a clown who cried in the alley. And it's hard, oh it's hard, and it's hard. But a hard rain's gonna fall. Yeah, a hard rain's gonna fall. did you meet, my blue-eyed song? Well, who did you meet, my darling young one? Met a young child beside a dead pony. I met a white man who walked a black dog. Met a young woman whose body was burning. I met a young girl, she gave me a rainbow. I met one man who was wounded in love. I met another man who was wounded in hatred. And it's hard, oh, it's hard, and it's hard, and it's hard, but a hard rain's gonna fall. Yeah, a hard rain's gonna fall.
Dear Rodney, since coming to this country, I have had the growing feeling that a university education is not for me. I tried in every possible way to get into more advanced courses of creative writing, but was not allowed to, merely because of the damned regulations of this fucking place. After one thing and another, I decided to quit this place and try to get into another school. I had heard about a school in Ohio called Antioch College, which is supposed to be about the best in the US for creative writing. I dropped out of school at the end of last semester and applied there. This is not all, however. Just before I signed out of Ohio University, I managed to get into a little scrape with the city cops for drinking and disturbing the peace, among other things, and had to spend a rather pleasant night in the city jail. Well, the university found out about the incident, and because of their broadness of mind, I was suspended from the university until June this year. As I said, I applied to Antioch College and heard from them this week telling me that I would be unable to enter their college until I was once again in good standing with this place. This means that I would have to reapply here for summer school or something, which I have no intention of doing. I've been carrying on my studying on my own. Studies, of course, that have nothing whatever to do with any university education. Studies that have to do with me. I have been wallowing in existentialism, and you already know of my interest in Zen Buddhism. Well, this interest has now turned into something of a faith, if it can be called that. I cannot explain in words what I've seen. What I can now say that I know, using the word in a mystical sense, is that I have seen completely the absurdity of this monster on self man has built up around him, and the unpleasantness of all its tentacles, such as religion, morality of any kind, and systems of life with their great wars, etc., etc. I'm afraid that all this has become too much for me. And I feel the time has come now when I must simply leave it and follow my own way. I'm not running from anything, since there is nothing to run from and nowhere to run to. I simply feel I must get away to somewhere else where this great and hideous nonentity man has created for himself will not be so prevalent. I can no longer stand all this self-deception and disillusionment I see around me. Have you ever heard of LSD and the other psychedelic drugs? Well, Here are drugs that produce in the human mind the effect of the Zen experience of Satori, or enlightenment. Well, I've been dabbling with these drugs, among other things, for quite a while. And I can tell you, the last time I had this drug, I finally reached what I've been striving for years. I finally had the full-blown mystical experience of Satori. And now I am free, Rodney. Not in any sense of the word as you would know it, but truly free. The good thing about the drug is that you can remember exactly what passed through you when you come down off it. In the state of mind I'm in at present, I can no longer go on with this kind of life, this life of a disillusioned system, because I'm no longer disillusioned. I wish I could express to you what I mean.
Dear Denny, at first it wasn't all drugs and alcohol. We had some truly joyful times, some intimately sharing times, some times of incredible closeness, some happy times. When I returned in February, Mike was drinking a lot and trying every drug he could get his hands on, often doing both together. His behavior became unpredictable, and there were times when I feared for my life, times when I hid all the sharp knives in the apartment and/or myself. I did not have much money, and nor did Mike. But when he wasn't drinking or on drugs, we were spending money on books and records. There was no further talk of jobs or Antioch. Somewhere along the line, Mike had picked up a 30-day suspended sentence for having been found drunk in a public place. One night in mid-March, Mike terrified me. He was drunk and high. I was scared, so I called the police, thinking that they would pick him up and keep him overnight where he couldn't harm himself or me. But I forgot about the 30-day suspended sentence, and when he was identified, he was put in jail to serve his sentence. The police asked me if I was the wife Michael was talking about, and promptly arrested me, charging Mike and I with cohabitation with fornication, and put me in jail too. As Ohio recognized common law marriage, the lawyer established that we were married, so the court dismissed the cohabitation charges on condition that I return to Canada immediately, and only when I was back in Canada and notified them would they release Michael and deport him back to Barbados. I joined Mike in Barbados in May. When I did arrive, your parents were incredibly good to me, to both of us. By July 1964, I was living with my mother and Jack at Retreat Gardens. I had just become too tired and drained to cope anymore. I was desperately unhappy.
Once, in a desert land far to the east, there lived a wealthy man in the flower of manhood, who above all the great and wonderful things he possessed, owned and loved most a beautiful well that stood in his garden. The water this well yielded up to him was clearer and sweeter than the fresh waters anywhere else in the land. And so did he love and cherish this clearness and sweetness that he drew from the well every day and every night, so that all his great lands and possessions might flourish and be well watered and grow in abundance and beauty. And so he would drink and wash his skin daily from the waters, sometimes when even it was not needed, so that he might only bathe himself in his own pleasure and luxury from the well. And so he loved the waters of his well that he taxed it hard, both day and night for many months. And so blinded by his own pleasures in the well was he, that never once did he give thought to the needs of the well itself. Never once did he heed the demands of the well. Until one day, in the clearness of a new dawn, the well ran suddenly dry and refused to yield yet another drop of its lovely waters up to him. For days the man was so stricken with grief that he stood peering down into the well, pining and lamenting and tearing his hair, and in a loud voice beseeching the well to once more yield even a trickle or a single drop up to him. But the well remained silent and was dry.
And the days passed into weeks, and the weeks into months, and still the man remained by his well, pleading and begging for its services once again, but all to no avail. And during this time, all his lands and lovely possessions slowly left him, and his estates gradually dried up and died into the desert sands, and his great house crumbled into ruin under the wind and the sun. And the man cared nothing for all this, for he had no thought for anything else but to see his beloved well spring forth with cool water again. Until at last the man was left with nothing and was naked, and still cared nothing for it all, but spent all his long days and short nights watching and peering into the well, hoping to see a single drop appear. And never once did he stop to eat or rest or sleep, until his very flesh began to shrivel on his bones, and in a matter of weeks he became old and weak, and his tongue swelled up in his face and stuck to the top of his mouth so that he could no longer speak. And a terrible thirst scorched the insides of his throat and tore at his breast, a dreadful thirst that burnt in his veins and dimmed his eyes, that seared his splitting lungs with every living breath he took. And still he remained by his well, peering down into its great depths in hungry silence, and hoping and thirsting.
Until at last, one day when the cruel sun was at its very highest peak, beating down mercilessly on his haggard body, the man heaved a last terrible sigh through his cracked and swollen lips, and his wasted frame slid slowly to the foot of the well and lay still. And after many years, the desert winds took the dust of his bones and scattered them far away from the sight of the well, and they were lost in a million places over the sands. And the well in this story was the man's wife, and the thirst he died of was love.
Oh, where have you been, Lord Randall, my son? Where have you been, my handsome young man? I've been to the wild with mother, make my bed soon. For I'm weary with the hunting, fain would lie down. I'm weary with the hunting, fain would lie down. Where got ye a dinner, Lord Randall, my son? Where got ye a dinner, my handsome young man? Well, I dine with my true love, mother, make my bed soon. But I'm weary with the hunting, fain would lie down. I'm weary with the hunting, fain would lie down. ye to your dinner, Lord Randall, my son? What got ye to your dinner, my handsome young man? I got a eel boiled in broth, mother, make my bed soon. But I'm weary with a hunting, fain would lie down. I'm weary with a hunting, fain would lie down. What became of your greyhounds, Lord Randall, my son? What became of your greyhounds, my handsome young man? Oh, they swelled and they died, mother, make my bed soon. But I'm weary with the hunting, fain would lie down. I'm weary with the hunting, fain would lie down. Oh, fairy are poison, Lord Randall, my son. Ah, fairy are poison, my handsome young man. Oh, yes, I am poisoned. Mother, make my bed soon. For I'm sick at the heart and fain would lie down. I'm sick at the heart and fain would lie down. I'm sick at the heart, fain would lie down. I'm sick at my heart, fain would lie down.
I think at these times of many things and many people. I think of Sue most times, beautiful Sue with the lines of a swan, frightened easy as a fawn in the forest. By this time deep in dreams with her long hair spread out the color of the sun, soak in the dark and scattering light to the dungeons of my constant night. I think love poems as a poor lonesome invalid, knowing of my power to destroy the good souls of the road that know no sickness except that of kindness. You ask of love? There is no love except in silence, and silence doesn't say a word. Ah, but Sue, she knows me well, perhaps too well, and is above all the true fortune teller of my soul. I think perhaps the only one.
The time is done. The time of parting is done. And all that so briefly and beautifully was, now is no more. Nothing but a violent vapor drifting in the quiet halls of memory. This is all that rests now. This only is. And this is all.
This is the pain I felt going up in the car. It came to me, I memorized it and wrote it down when I got home. I hope you will like it and keep it. Goodbye, Sue. I love you in my own way. Goodbye. Love, Mike. Dear Sue, I felt like I had crawled out of a dark hole and into light for the first time. I started looking at the leaves of the trees outside and the chickens and the grass and everything, and all I felt was an almost pleasant and relaxing feeling of indifference, utter and complete indifference. Gradually, the elated feeling has worn off, but even now I almost always feel great. but the indifference remains constant and profound. My indifference begins with myself. I no longer care, Sue, about whatever happens to me. I really and truly no longer care. It's not that I dislike myself, no. It goes even beyond liking or disliking myself. It's simply that I no longer care even enough to do either one. Nor is this a sick feeling of letting go completely. The indifference I feel towards everything has a kind of outward tone to it. I simply feel that life can go on or end naturally and make not the slightest bit of difference to me or anyone else, and that it all matters not the least bit.
What do you do now, my blue-eyed son? What do you do now, my darling young one? I'm going back out for the rain starts falling. I walk to the depths of the deepest black forest, where the people are many and their hands are all empty, and the pellets of poison are flooding their waters, where the home in the valley meets the damp, dirty prison. Executioner's face is always well hidden, where hunger is ugly, where souls are forgotten. Black is the color where none is the number, and I tell it and think it and speak it and breathe it, and reflect from the mountain so all souls can see it. Then I'll stand on the ocean until I start sinking, but I know my song well before I start singing. And it's hard, oh it's hard, and it's hard, and it's hard, but a hard rain's gonna fall. Yeah, a hard rain's gonna fall. Sometimes awake before the rising of the sun, as I pause to watch the daylight break on the horizon, and I wonder at the beauty of a new day just begun. Here from my shack, here from my shack by the sea. the sandy shore. As I stand here leaning on a broken wooden door, watch the small waves roll up to retreat, break once more. Before my shine, oh, just before my shine by the sea. Each day passes slowly as I stroll by the sea, savoring the sweet fresh breezes, feeling myself free. Life holds no trouble, no troubles bother me. Here in my shack, here in my shack by the sea. Here in my shack, here in my shack by the sea.
Dear Sue, thank you for sharing Michael's letters with me and for sharing your time together with him with me. Without you, my search for my brother would still be incomplete. It was a long emotional journey for both of us. Much easier for me than it was for you. Spriggets, in his words, is Michael's story. And you, especially, helped me tell it truthfully and honestly. Thank you, Sue. Thank you. Love, Denny.